Good afternoon, IT Business Owners Group. We are joined today with Ryan Bowman, the sales engineer for ThreatLocker. Ryan, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me today, Scott.
We're glad you're a part of it. So I keep hearing a lot about ThreatLocker and the zero trust with ThreatLocker. What can you tell us about ThreatLocker and the zero trust capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So, zero trust is maybe one of those buzzwords that's getting thrown around a lot today. And some people use it correctly. Some people use it as a marketing term as it suits their need. But ThreatLocker, as we're going to demonstrate to you today, is a true zero trust platform. And we're going to go through some demo today, show you how that works, how we allow you as an MSP to enable zero trust in your environment and at a level that's manageable, because that's always been the difficulty from an MSP perspective, is to manage that type of platform at the level that you need to, and that's what ThreatLocker has set out to do and make that manageable for the MSP and not just the enterprise.
Yeah, so that always has been an issue with, how do you, there's like a fine line between locking your clients down, but locking them down to protect them at the same time, allowing them to be functional and productive with their work. So I think ThreatLocker solves that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to give you some examples of that today. But we make that onboarding process easy. We have a learning process that automatically helps you understand what's already running in the environment and builds a lot of those policies and rules for you so that you don't have to do that in a manual process.
Beautiful. Well, I am excited to see what ThreatLocker has to offer.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's jump into it then. We are going to be, I believe, watching the Facebook messaging for chat. So if you have questions as I'm going through things today, don't be afraid to post them, and we'll take some time along the way to take a look at the questions that have come in and make sure they get answered for you. Before we just jump into the actual demo, which we'll get to in a moment, but just to kind of set the stage and have you understand where ThreatLocker is coming from a little bit, and that is that we're all used to running all of these threat detection tools, our antiviruses, our EDRs, our MDRs, and add the latest acronym that has come along, and we're trying to detect and stop these threats that are coming at us day after day. And when you use these kinds of tools, the threat detection capabilities are largely outside of our control. We are relying on the intelligence of the application that we've chosen to identify and stop the threats that exist. And look, whether we believe it or not, or whether you understand it yet or not, these things are never going to stop every threat. It is impossible to keep up with the threats that are coming. I mean, they're pretty good. They find a lot of things for sure, but it's just changing so rapidly. It's an impossible task to just find every possible threat that's coming along. And so we see people trying the next detection tool, adding another layer of detection, trying to find the next way to stop the unknown things. What we see our partners and MSPs in general, kind of skipping many places, is the control aspect of our environments. We have controls, we have zero trust in place from a firewall standpoint. Think about your firewall. Your firewall doesn't just allow all the traffic and then try to decide if there's traffic that's bad or not. It may do that on top of the traffic that's being allowed, but you decide what traffic can flow in and out of your network. Those are hard and fast rules that you've created. And that's the same concept that ThreatLocker uses, but from an application standpoint. You as the MSP have the control of what it is that's allowed to run in your environment. We're not allowing somebody else to make those decisions for us. And the other significant component too that I'll just hit on here real quickly is even if we could stop every threat from coming into our environment, there are still those fireless malware attacks that are living off the land that we have to deal with. So PowerShell and RunDLL and these tools are being used all of the time to launch attacks. And they're not necessarily considered a threat until they start to exhibit bad behavior, in which case some amount of damage may already be done at that point. So with that, let me dive into it, and
Sure.
we'll just kind of show you what ThreatLocker looks like. I'll give you some examples of how we implement some of these controls that I share here already. So
Perfect.
I did share my screen here, so I hope that's coming through okay.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, we are an endpoint-based security product. So there's a small agent that gets deployed on each machine, and we have a lot of RMM scripts already written for you to make this deployment very easy. Most RMMs, you can have your agents deployed in probably 15 minutes or less.
Okay.
When we deploy our agents, the computers start out in what's called a learning mode, and this is really key to make it manageable from an MSP perspective. We are going to figure out for you automatically what applications already exist in your environment. We scan your computer, we watch what's happening in our logs, we can see everything that's running, and then we're going to build for you a set of policies. So I'm just going to look at my workstation policies for this example. So without you doing anything other than deploying the agent, we are going to get a list like this populated for you, identifying all of these applications that are already in the environment that your people are using.
Okay.
Now,
So that
yeah,
keeps you from having to go in one by one for all the applications prior to ThreatLocker getting installed, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Now, you can obviously change this after the fact. It's very probable. In fact, in probably most cases, you are going to find applications in the customer environment that you wish wouldn't have been there because you maybe didn't have a control in place prior to limit their ability to do those kinds of things. So you can adjust these things down the road to fit your need. If they shouldn't be running a particular application, you'll be able to remove that policy. But to get started, we're going to show you what's already there. Look, these things are already in the environment.
Okay.
Now, one of the keys here is you'll see a number of these applications say built in behind them. And one of the challenges with application whitelisting in the past has been the massive amount of work that's involved in keeping those applications up to date. So there's a patch that comes out. There's a new version that gets released. And now we have a whole new set of files that have to be added to this whitelist. With the built-in apps, ThreatLocker does that work for you. So just using Slack here as an example, they release a patch. We find out from Slack exactly what files are part of this new update that came out. What are all the new versions by hash of the file in most cases. And we update that for you on the back end. So you go to deploy the latest version of Slack, and there's no work that you need to do from a ThreatLocker standpoint at all, because those new files have already been added to the list for you, and they're simply allowed to install and allowed to run.
Okay. Before the MSP even has a chance to do it.
Exactly.
Okay.
The MSP doesn't have to do it. Yep. Now, we have over 400 built-in apps.
Okay.
So the vast majority of the applications that your customers are using are probably built-in apps, with the exception being those maybe industry-specific line of business or custom applications they might have. Each of your customers might have one or so of those that might require a little bit of interaction on your part. But the vast majority of the common applications your customers are using, we're going to do that heavy lifting on the back end for you.
That's beautiful.
So what we do then is these computers run in this learning mode for a week or so that we can make sure we're catching everything that's happening in that environment. During that time, you can look at the unified audit. This is where I mentioned we log everything that's running. Let me just pull a sample set of data here. So you see executables being listed here. Any file that executes, we're going to be logging. So executables, DLLs, script files, so on and so forth. And you'll see the detail of each file here as well. This file we know is a signed Google file. We know what computer ran it. We know the hash of the file. We know it's part of Google Chrome. Okay, so all of this is logged. And during the learning period, we are simulating for you what your experience would be if you had turned ThreatLocker on into a secured mode. So if there are any applications in the environment that ThreatLocker's learning process wasn't able to detect for some reason, maybe it's something unusual about it and we couldn't pick up on it, you're going to see that in the logs during this learning period. And so we'll be able to make some manual policy adjustments in order to accommodate that unique application. And so we do all of that before we ever start enforcing the ThreatLocker policies in order to minimize that potential impact to the end user where they suddenly can't run an application that they need to have.
Okay.
So once we're comfortable with that, we've addressed anything that needed some manual help. That's when we set the computer into the secured mode. And at that point in time, now ThreatLocker is enforced. From this point forward, the only applications that are allowed to run in the environment are those that are on the policy list. Anything that's not here is simply denied. So user gets an email attachment that's an executable that looks like an invoice and they try to open it, it's blocked because that's not on the list here anywhere. They click a link and download a file, or maybe intentionally or inadvertently, however they download a file, doesn't matter. When that file tries to execute, if it's not part of one of these applications, we simply don't let it run. Now let me show you a quick example of what that looks like. I'm just going to run a TeamViewer setup here for the sake of example.
Okay.
So nothing wrong with TeamViewer, but because it's not on my list here, it gets blocked. It doesn't matter if it was good, bad, or indifferent. It hasn't previously been used. There is not a policy to allow it, and so therefore we don't allow it to run. We also, though, present the user with a pop-up message letting them know that this has indeed been blocked. And if this is an application they really think they need to have, they have the ability to request access to have this software added to the list.
Very
now this
nice.
can be branded, by the way. This can be your MSP name and logo. If you have some co-managed environments, maybe it's the customer's own logo. You can do that however you like. The user can include a message to you, and they can also provide an email address for correspondence where they would get a reply back once you've processed the request.
Okay.
So this, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was going to see, I saw it said log in as admin. Would that allow a technician to bypass that easily if they had to add something quickly to that workstation?
Yeah, absolutely. So what would happen is, well, let me come back to that in a moment, and I'll show you when we get to that spot.
Sure.
So when that request gets sent, it comes in here to our approval center.
Okay.
Now, we have some integrations with PSA tools. If you don't have an integration, most of your PSAs will turn an email into a ticket. So we'll email your defined address so that you can even get a ticket when one of these requests are made.
Okay.
But it comes in here to our approval center where we can take a look at this request that has been made. And now this is the point, Scott. If you clicked on that login as admin, it would take you directly to this page. So it just saves you a couple of clicks of going through the request access point, because then you can make your settings on if and how you want to allow this application to run. So it's pretty obvious in this case, TeamViewer signed file up here. In fact, down here, you see that there's a matching application, which is for TeamViewer. This is one of our 400 plus built-in apps. So if you try to install something that we recognize, we're going to let you know that. Say, we know what this file belongs to. It's part of TeamViewer.
Okay.
Now, in the event that that's not the case, if this is something that's not on our list, you have the ability to create your own application. And this could be a custom app that ThreatLocker has never seen before. It could be anything at all. We have what's called an installation mode, which will allow you to install a piece of software. And as you're installing it, we capture all the files that just got installed. And we will build that policy for you automatically based on what you just put on your machine. And we'll allow all those files to run for you. So it's a very automatic process to add something, even if it's something ThreatLocker's never seen before.
Okay. Very nice.
In this example, though, we're just gonna approve TeamViewer because that's what it is. We're gonna permit this, and then we can decide who we're permitting it for. We can be as granular as an individual computer. Most often, it's gonna be something like a computer group. Say this is a workstation application or a server application. Or even as an MSP, you can have global policies. You can have a policy that will apply to every one of your customers. Say your RMM agent, for example. Every endpoint that you manage within ThreatLocker needs to be able to run your RMM agent. And so that can be one policy that accommodates all of your customers. So we'll simply save this. And because we saved it for the workstations group, we're going to go to the policies list again, select workstations, and you'll see that we now have TeamViewer added to the list as one of the applications that's now permitted. So very easy to make those adjustments and modifications when new needs, new applications come along that need to be added to the list.
Got it.
Do we have any comments or questions in the comments there, Steve? That we should, or Scott, sorry, that we should take a
no
look
worries.
at?
I'm not seeing any right now.
Nothing right now. Okay, don't be afraid to post. We'll keep an eye on those as we go through, and try to address those for you. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is our ring fencing, and you see the ring fencing icons over here on some of these policies. And ring fencing really has to do with applications that are allowed to run and what it is that they can or cannot do. This is how we control those fileless malware attacks, the living off the land type of attacks, where things like PowerShell and C-script and things like this are utilized to launch an attack. Because the truth of the matter is applications, when they run on your computer, they can do everything on your computer that you as a user can do. They can launch other applications, they can go out to the internet and do things, download files perhaps, and they have access to your data. Every piece of data that you as a user has access to, every application on your computer has access to that same data. Now they may not utilize that, they may not be doing anything with it, but there's also nothing to stop them from getting access to that data should they try to do that. So let me give you an example here of what this looks like. So I'm just going to do this through a Word document so you can see what this would look like. This document just has a couple links in it for demonstration purposes. This could just as well be an email. This could be a PDF. This could be your browser clicking on a link. And this first link is a link to Google, just as it looks. But you know as well as anybody that links are always not always as they appear, and we can disguise links. So this link, second one, looks exactly the same. But when I look at that one, it doesn't go to a web page at all. It would launch PowerShell. And this is how attackers trick people into clicking things that they shouldn't and launching something that had no reason to ever run, and they get a foothold into the system. We know, though, that Microsoft Office users have no reason to be launching PowerShell from within an Office document. That is not something that happens as the user is going about their day doing their work.
Sure.
So we have a policy for Microsoft Office with some ring fencing parameters on it. And I'll show you those here. If I edit this policy, we are blocking the ability for Microsoft Office to interact with things like PowerShell, command prompt, and so forth. These are all highly weaponized tools. Every computer has them, and you can do a lot of damage with these tools. We talk a lot about PowerShell because it seems like anymore there isn't much you can't do through PowerShell. And so there is no reason for an end user, a front-end application such as Office, to be able to launch an application like this. So with that policy turned on, even if the user falls for this and clicks the link, we just simply don't let PowerShell run because we know that's an action that doesn't need to happen.
Nice.
Now, another thing that we can do is from a PowerShell standpoint, let me show you this one. Here we have PowerShell being ring fenced. Besides just links, they will try to execute things, maybe getting access to your data, like uploading data to the internet. A macro perhaps could run a set of PowerShell commands that would look for your data and simply try to upload it to the internet. In fact, I have an example I show sometimes. I'm going to skip that, I think, for today, but where it would just look for documents and send them up to the internet. Well, we can ring fence PowerShell to say, PowerShell really doesn't need access to my data files. We use PowerShell to connect to servers, maybe Microsoft 365, and do some administration things there. we really don't need our network shares through PowerShell. And so we can limit its ability to do that and say PowerShell does not have the ability to access my network data. And so it can't do anything with it. It can't steal it. It can't encrypt it. It can't do any harm to my files.
Very nice.
Another restriction is internet access. And again, I'm using PowerShell as an example, but the same concept applies to those other tools that I referenced earlier. Does PowerShell need access to the internet? In some cases, yes, particularly within the MSP. Of course, you guys use PowerShell all the time. On the average workstation, if they need PowerShell for certain applications, it's probably running things locally. It's probably not doing very much to the internet. And so what we would do is we would identify the sites that PowerShell does indeed need access to. I have a couple examples here. Maybe you're using Teams. Maybe you have some Logitech hardware. They go out to their website to check for updates. Any website that PowerShell legitimately needs to connect to, we will allow it to connect to those sites. We're really putting a zero trust policy on PowerShell itself, where it can only communicate to the websites that it needs to communicate with. Because one of the attack methods is go to the internet and get the payload, right? If I can just get PowerShell to run, I don't have to execute a file on the machine itself. I'm going to go out to the internet. I'm going to pull that payload in. Just as an example, the SolarWinds attack. They used run DLL. They got that malicious DLL on there. Run DLL ran that DLL, which went out to the internet and tried to pull in the malicious payload. Well, if run DLL couldn't connect to that foreign website, it wouldn't have been able to go any further. We will identify these sites during the learning phase, the same period in the first couple of weeks where we're identifying the applications that are on your environment. We're also watching what websites PowerShell is legitimately connecting to. And we're going to add these for you. You can add your own if you need to. You could do, star.microsoft.com if you wanted to, those kinds of custom roles. But then once you've secured the environment, when that foreign, unexpected, unknown website tries to get contacted using one of these tools, it's simply going to be blocked. Stopping that attack, stopping the ability for it to get that payload. Now you'll see a good list of ring fence policies here. We have 30 plus default ring fence templates for you. And this is one of the things that often after we talk about this, well, that's great, but how do I know what PowerShell is supposed to do and what it's not supposed to do?
Right.
We've done that work for you. These are templated. Your browsers, command prompt, and all of these things, we have the templates already written for you. You don't have to build them from scratch. A lot of them, in fact, are turned on for you automatically. Some of them are optional under our suggested policies, where you can turn them on if you feel like they're appropriate for your environment. One size doesn't necessarily fit all, and so those can be done on a case-by-case basis. You can also make your own if you want to. If I wanted to ring fence TeamViewer and say TeamViewer can be used for remote support, but I don't want my data being transferred over TeamViewer, I could put the same restriction on TeamViewer that I had on PowerShell, where TeamViewer can't access my data, can't get to my network shares. So you can do that on each application if you like, or you can use our templates that cover and protect against the most frequently and most often weaponized tools that are out there.
Very nice.
Okay, we'll take a quick check, Scott. Any comments that we need to address?
Yeah, we've got Mitchell Rom said, just began trial of ThreatLocker. Is there any benefit to deploying on customer servers?
Oh, absolutely. Why would you not want to protect a server? And in fact, servers are even easier because nobody's messing with the server except you, hopefully. And so once the learning process has completed, you can secure them very easily and very quickly because the only thing that comes along and changes them are you as the administrator, in which case you can protect them, or you can make the adjustments within ThreatLocker to allow the changes that you need. I'll give you one quick example. We did have a client a while back now where a server had been compromised using a remote access tool. Never mind the details on that, but they got into the server through a remote access tool. They were on the server with domain admin rights, and they were trying to encrypt the server and could not because ThreatLocker was blocking everything they tried to run. Even though they were domain admins, doesn't matter. We run at the kernel level. Doesn't matter what level of rights you have on the machine itself. If it's not permitted within ThreatLocker, it will not run. And so in that case, we were able to stop that attack because they couldn't get past ThreatLocker. So that's just one simple example, but absolutely protect your servers. It's the most critical piece in your environment. Yes, you don't have users clicking links and doing silly things like that on your server, but there are plenty of other ways that a server can come under attack. Don't leave that open hole in your network. Okay, so the next piece I'll move into, and we just touched briefly on user permissions there in that little discussion. And our next component is what we call elevation control. And this is a privileged access management tool. This is a frustration. I was an MSP for many years, and there was nothing more annoying than having to do a quick little setting on a customer's machine. It requires admin rights. You have to maybe log off, log in, you make the change, you log off, you log back in as the user, you realize you didn't do it right the first time, and you do it all over again. Now, maybe I'm the only one who made the mistake and had to do it twice, but that process, which could have been 15 seconds, turns into 15 minutes. And you also may have applications that require admin rights to even run, period. Some of these legacy applications have that kind of requirement. And so you end up just having to make the users admins just so they can run their software. So let me show you a couple examples of what that looks like. One of the most common scenarios is a user needs to install a piece of software, and they're not an admin, and so you have to provide credentials. So I permitted TeamViewer as an application earlier, but we didn't actually install it. So I still don't have TeamViewer installed on my machine. So if I now needed to install that as an administrator, of course, I need my credentials. But we also give you a ThreatLocker pop-up, same as before, where the user has the ability to request now elevation so they can run this installer as an admin. So this comes into the approval center. Same as before. Now, by the way, if you know this in advance, I could have done both of these steps in one process. I'm doing it twice for the sake of example, but you could do this in one step in the real world when you realize, oh, I'm permitting a new application. Yes, they're going to need to be admins to install it. That can be a single process. So TeamViewer is the application that's being installed. I'm going to permit this. I can set a time period on this, like 1 hour, for example, where we are going to assist in elevating to local admin rights for only a limited time, because they don't need admin rights after the application has been installed, just to do the actual install. So we'll again permit this for the workstations group. Now, what we're going to do back under our policies list here, we now have an additional TeamViewer policy that includes the elevation component, but it's going to expire. So after that hour, this policy is gone, and I'm back to just the standard TeamViewer policy that does not include elevation. So now when the user goes to install TeamViewer as an administrator, ThreatLocker has elevated me to admin rights, and now I can go off and do the install without anybody having to provide those credentials. Now, you could do the same elevation like I have on Notepad that here that is not, there is no expiration. I have elevation turned on here. So anytime that I need to run Notepad++ as an administrator, I can do that. ThreatLocker will elevate me.
So I do have a question. When you're talking about the timing, you said it was good for an hour. If your client needs to do like a big install or something for something that is obviously approved, maybe a line of business or anything like that, can you go through and set like a schedule? So in other words, instead of setting like a limit of an hour, can you say, okay, next Wednesday at 2 p.m., we will allow it to run for an hour to get through the process? Is that possible?
Yes, you absolutely can.
Okay.
Actually, and you do that on the computers page.
Okay.
We have what's called a maintenance mode. And so in here, you can set a schedule. So in fact, elevation here, I can set a schedule. When am I going to allow this to elevate? Now this method for elevation is based on the system as a whole. So this is not dependent on any one application. We are going to turn the currently logged in user into an administrator for this schedule. So even as technicians are working on customers' machines, this is another great tool they love to use. Instead of having to do all those log off and log ons or put their credentials in over and over again as they're working on the machine, they can turn the current logged in user into an admin for an hour or so while they're working on the machine. And then after that time period, it goes back to a standard user and can save them some of those steps. And you can do this, some of the other modes here, like I mentioned earlier, installation mode to be able to install a piece of software. This might have to do with a little bit your example, Scott, where somebody needs to do an upgrade. You could pre-schedule this and say this application is going to be installed, tonight at, after hours. The third-party vendor is going to log in at 6 p.m. and they're going to start an upgrade. And so we're going to use installation mode during that time period. So yes, those things can be scheduled as well.
Very nice.
All right, now back to my notepad here, for example. If you remember, I ran this as an admin. So notepad is running with administrative rights right now. And there are other tools and utilities that allow you to do this kind of thing. But one of the gaps there is that once I'm running an application as an administrator, if I can use this application to launch something else, which I easily can with a browse here, I can now run any other application that I choose, just using PowerShell to illustrate, as an admin. And it is going to allow me to do that even though I don't have a policy that says PowerShell can be an admin. Because I launched this from within this Notepad application that's running as administrator, those credentials follow to any other process that's launched from within Notepad. So when you elevate an application, you're creating a launch pad in the environment that could be used to gain admin access to other areas of the system. Now, what we do with that, if I go back to my policies here, we can combine elevation with ring fencing. One of my ring fencing parameters that I have is to deny the interaction for all other applications. So if I turn this on for this application, I'm isolating this application from everything else on the system. I am not allowing Notepad to launch anything else. As admin or not as admin for that matter, it simply can't launch anything else. And so we don't allow that to be used as a launch point where it could get access to other areas of the system that we didn't intend. Okay, any comments, Scott?
No, it is very granular. I really like it a lot. I think it's something that all MSPs need to be, utilizing in their stack, their current stack. It definitely is a handy tool to have and can save your butt and your clients' butts.
Okay, perfect. So the next piece I want to look a little bit at is what we call our storage control. The first thing I want to point out with storage control is back to our unified audit. I showed you earlier where we log all of the applications that are being executed in your environment. In addition to things that are executing, we also log data that is being accessed. So I'm just going to search for a Word document here for an example. This Word document was sitting on my network share, and every time this file was touched, we have a log entry. I have reads, writes, moves, deletes. We know exactly who touched this file and how they touched it. So when those customers call and say, what did you do to my data? Because it's always your fault, right? My files aren't here anymore, and I talked to you last week, so you must have done something to my data. You can now use the logs to figure out what happened. If they moved it by mistake, the old drag and drop into a new folder, we see the move, and I see a write action into the new folder, so now I know where you moved that file. If it did get deleted, I have a delete log. I know who deleted it, what computer, what user. I know exactly when they deleted it. So if I do need to restore this from backup, I know exactly what backup set to go to, where I can I can get this file back quickly and easily.
Nice.
All right. So beyond just the logging, we can obviously control access to data using storage control policies. So again, I'm going to just look at my workstation's policies here, and I'm going to show you this example just using a public share. This might be common in a lot of environments where you have a public folder here, miscellaneous documents being installed, some kind of shared place where people are putting their files. I have a policy over here controlling this network share, my public folder. I'm actually permitting read and write access to this data. Not too earth-shattering there. But down here, I'm permitting access only for a specific set of applications. So I can open this document with Word, as you would expect. Right here you see WinWord as one of my permitted applications. If I try to open this same file with, I'll use Notepad, Notepad cannot open this file because it is not on the list of approved applications that has access to this data. Now, we're not probably trying to stop Notepad, but think about in terms of an attack. In the event that somehow a malicious piece of software was able to execute within your environment, even if that were to occur, that application cannot touch this data. Just the way that Notepad was denied, that malicious application has no access to the data. Can't delete it, can't steal it, can't encrypt it, can't touch it. So it's another layer of protection around the data, which is ultimately what we're all trying to protect. In limiting the access to the data, limits the ways in which it can be compromised in any fashion. Now, just another couple of quick examples of ways that our partners like to use this feature. Think about your backup destination. Or you're backing up to another server that's on the network, a NAS, some type of location like that. Identify your backup destination and only allow your backup software the ability to access that destination. Same concept. Even if something's running, the only way that your backup data can be compromised if they do it from within the backup software itself. Or QuickBooks as another example, or any really application that has a network location where the data lives. QuickBooks is a common one. Identify that QuickBooks folder location and allow, again, only QuickBooks the ability to access that data. Makes it much harder for something bad to happen to it. In fact, with those policies, as you saw, only a single application was in there. I can't even browse to that folder using Windows Explorer because Windows Explorer isn't a permitted application. And so I can't even get there. I would have to find my QuickBooks file from within QuickBooks itself. Now, another common scenario is the ability to control USB drives. If your customers don't need to use USB drives, they shouldn't be given access to USB drives. It's too easy to bring something harmful into the network, or perhaps for them to take something valuable out of the network. Now, I realize there are other ways to do that, but USB is a very easy way. Slip that flash drive in your pocket, and very easy for data to come and go. So you can do something like I have here very simply, deny read and write access to all USBs. Now, we're only talking about storage devices here. So we don't care about your keyboards and your mice and other such peripherals. We're only stepping in when it's detected as a storage device. So in the event that I tried to use a USB drive, it would be denied, just the way that an application was denied. And of course, the ThreatLocker pop-up where they have the ability to request access to this USB. So if they do have an isolated need, that can be requested, comes into the approval center. We take a look at this. We identify the devices by serial number. So even if you make an exception to the rule and say, okay, yes, you have a use case for a USB, we're going to allow you this USB and this USB only. You still can't bring that USB drive from home. You can only use this one drive that we've assigned. So even if you have a handful of drives in the environment that get used on a regular basis, fine, allow those as company issued USB drives, but don't allow anything else. What level of permissions do you want to give them? And where can the drive be used? If you're making a single-use exception, you can limit that exception to a single computer. Scott, you need that USB drive. You can only access that USB drive on your computer. If you try to share that with somebody else, it's going to be denied for them.
Got it.
Unless you choose an option to allow that to move around the organization, then of course that would be allowed. Now, it also doesn't have to be a black and white yes or no permit. In the event that we say, yes, we're going to give you access to the USB, we can get very granular with the control if we like. We could say, fine, you can have the USB. Why do you need that? Well, I have some pictures that I need. Okay, perfect. You can have read access to JPEG files only. And that's the only thing you can use that drive for. Or maybe it's PDF files or whatever the use case is. If you want to make sure that drive is not used in a way that you didn't intend for it to be used, you can limit it down to that level if you want to.
Great.
You can also do things like control on encryption. So HIPAA, this is a great use case. They require removable media to be encrypted. And so you can make a blanket policy that just outright denies everything that's encrypted. Everything that's not encrypted is a flat out deny. Don't even ask me because you know the drive has to be encrypted. Or if you want to still allow them to request, and then you can say, let me encrypt that for you, and then you can have it, you can do that. You can control at the program level, just like I showed you on the network share, where only QuickBooks could access the QuickBooks folder. You could do that if it was a USB as well. A particular application utilizes a USB in some way, you could limit where only that application can access that USB, so somebody couldn't use even Windows Explorer to put other data onto that folder or onto that USB drive. Or expire policies. When you make those exceptions, then it's a short-term need. Fine, I'm going to allow you to use that, but in a couple of days, that policy is going to expire, and then that USB drive is no longer going to work anymore.
Very good.
So you can get very granular with the control if you wish. If you want to be just yes, no, certain drives yes, certain drives no, that's fine too. But you can get granular with the control, particularly when you have those environments with sensitive data. You have some customers out there with some highly technical, highly business intelligence type of data that they don't want to get out there. You can use some of these policies to limit the ways in which that data could be put onto any kind of storage device, really. So the whole concept, hopefully I've gotten the message across to you here in showing you ThreatLocker, is the zero trust concept is only allow things to happen, to run, to access data, and so forth in the environment that need the access, right? Just like on your NTFS permissions, you don't give everybody access to every folder. You only give them access to what they need. It's the same concept on this layer. If you don't need this application, don't allow it. If this application doesn't need access to your data, don't allow it. And if you do those kinds of things, you significantly reduce the attack surface. You're limiting the ways in which your data and your resources can be accessed, making it much, much harder for a compromise to be carried out.
Minimizing your risk.
Absolutely.
So Mitch also had another two questions here.
Okay.
He wanted to know, he said he was specifically, and we may have already touched on this, concerned about general deployment model. So many things to tweak on each system that will require so much time. About how long does it take typically?
Yeah, so, and this is a common question that does come up. I showed you a lot of detail today so that you could understand what ThreatLocker is doing and how it's doing it. Mm-hmm. Understand that 98% of that happens automatically. I showed you what actually happens. So if I had to, come up with an average, obviously the size customer and the complexity of the customer comes into play. But I would say the majority of end customers could be secured with probably about 2 hours or less of man hours to do that. Of course, there's a longer time period because ThreatLocker is doing the learning process over the course of a week or more. But for you to actually invest is very minimal. Okay. Because everything is happening automatic. The built-in apps, you don't have to worry about those. So all you're going to do is identify if any customizations need to happen for some of your specialized apps. And not all of them do. Some do, some don't. But that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for that couple of percentage of things that might be in your environment that need a little bit of manual adjustments, and that's it. And by the way, we would help you through that process. I think maybe this was it Mitch said that he's trialing ThreatLocker right now, so I'm not sure what stage you're in at the moment, but as you go through a trial process, we do that together. You will have several calls with a sales engineer. We will help you do the proof of concept. You'll deploy the agents. They'll go through the learning mode. We'll look at that audit review that I talked about where we will identify if anything needs to be customized in your policies. We will go through that together, show you how to identify what's normal and expected and what might be an indicator that, oh, I need to make a change here so that this doesn't cause me a problem down the road. And so we would do that together, get you into a secured mode where you can see then how that worked. Once you've secured your environment, did you have problems? Did we block some things that maybe you thought shouldn't be? We can learn how to then make those adjustments if that is the case. Hopefully, in most environments, we'll follow up a week after they've secured, and very little, if anything, has come up that we had to deal with, one or two things maybe, and we go through that process and show you how you would then tweak those things to make that seamless then for your customer going forward. So yeah, great question. And because we do show you a lot of detail, but just remember that most of that happens automatically.
He had another question as well. Can eligible applications be permitted to auto-populate into share access list during the 1 to 2 week learning period?
Okay, so I think what he's asking is, so a common application that maybe a variety of your customers use the same piece of software? Do you think I'm interpreting that right?
I think so.
Okay, so we wouldn't do that automatically. The automatic learning period will learn on a customer by customer basis. So what we learn for one organization doesn't automatically transfer over to other organizations, because you may or may not want that. There are some applications where that certainly can make sense. There are other applications where you wouldn't want to do that. So it's not going to happen automatically during the learning phase, but you can do it during that learning phase. So when you deploy that first customer and you identify some applications that are very common throughout your customer base, you can make policies that are global. I mentioned this very briefly, and a couple examples are, things like a remote access tool, your RMM agent, other tools like this, antivirus tool perhaps. Applications like this that are dominant throughout your customer list, and you just want every customer that you have to be able to use these applications, you can make a global policy for that. But that would be you making that decision, not ThreatLocker doing that automatically. Gotcha. So the capability's there, but you make that adjustment to say, this is something that's popular. I want everybody to have this policy.
So I've got a question myself, since you bring this up about ConnectWise. You've got this here on the screen, ConnectWise Screen Connect. Everybody knows we do updates. So is there a way to ring fence Screen Connects or any kind of remote software program to make sure that it's being used just for the purposes that you're using it for, not to, go in and utilize it to hijack and, encrypt all of your customers' endpoints?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the first part of your question is yes, any policy can be ring fenced. Okay. So if I edit this policy, I'll just give you a quick example of that. Okay. Instead of this being a standard permit policy, I'm going to say permit with ring fence. Okay. And that's going to now give me my ring fence parameters. So now what do I want to restrict? Do I want to allow Screen Connect to not launch anything else? That might get you in trouble with Screen Connect because that's a feature of Screen Connect to go out and run other things. But if you wanted to do that, you could. Does Screen Connect need access to my files? If it doesn't, we can turn that on. Don't allow Screen Connect to be used to gain access to your data.
Then it couldn't actually deploy ransomware to your clients and encrypt all the files.
Well, true. However, on that level, Now, I'm not a Screen Connect expert, but I think if somebody was going to try to do something like that, they would probably try to push a PowerShell script to do that. Okay. A PowerShell script is an executing file. So the application control, the whitelist, would block that script from being able to execute.
Okay.
Because that script as an executing file is not a part of any currently permitted application. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's huge. I mean, and every MSP's worst nightmare is their RMM getting compromised.
Absolutely.
Right? And even if that would happen, and they try to do, whether it's through the RMM or through something like Screen Connect, and they try to push a PowerShell script out to all of your customers to do some kind of harm, that script is going to get blocked on every one of your customers that has ThreatLocker because that script has not been permitted.
Okay.
So when you add a legitimate new script, you permit that. You add, hey, I have a new script I need to use. This is a good script. You put that on the allow list.
Okay, so the individual script would be what is allowed.
Correct.
Okay, because I was thinking to myself, well, I know a lot of technicians would use Screen Connect to log in and then deploy PowerShell. So we wouldn't want to necessarily block PowerShell, but at the same point, the scripts. I understand now. Makes total sense.
Yep, absolutely.
Very good.
Okay, I mean, one final comment that I have maybe is, I'm sure you guys watch the news. You may have seen the most recent White House executive order that was signed. And one of the requirements in that order is, I think they call it an application allow list, which is an application whitelist. So terminology aside, this is now being mandated in more environments than it was previously. It's also part of some of the CMMC requirements that had come out a little while ago. More and more regulations are requiring some kind of application control, which obviously ThreatLocker provides. We went over that today. They don't even know to suggest something like ring-fencing because this is a really unique product in the marketplace, which really just builds upon the application whitelisting and gives you an additional level of control. So the security community as a whole is recognizing the value and the protection that a zero trust architecture provides you. It's starting to get more and more press. And we've, hopefully we were able to demonstrate today that ThreatLocker makes that manageable for you, because that has been the problem. Many of you have known for many years that application whitelisting would be great, but you just couldn't justify it in the MSP practice. And ThreatLocker allows you to be able to do that. So if you want to learn more, if you go to ThreatLocker.com, go ahead and sign up for a demo. I realize you just saw a demo. You probably don't want to see the exact same thing again, but perhaps you have some questions that you want to discuss that maybe didn't want to type out, or you think of later after you get on the call, off this call. Go ahead and just sign up for a demo. You'll get a sales engineer on the line. You'll get a sales rep on the line. We can answer any technical questions. We can talk to you about pricing, and we'd be glad to spin anybody up with a trial who wants to give ThreatLocker a try. Put it on your own environment, put it out to a customer if you'd like. That's fine. We don't care where you want to try it, whatever you need to see to give yourself a level of comfort that ThreatLocker is going to be manageable for you and provide some value. We will help you all the way through that process and make sure that you're getting all the answers and the information that you need.
Well, that is great. Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate the in-depth deep dive into ThreatLocker. That was very, very informative. So
you're welcome. I appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you have any questions about ThreatLocker, want to go to ThreatLocker.com, sign up for a demo, and Ryan will reach out, or one of the fine folks from ThreatLocker will reach out to you. So I guess we will close it on that note.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Have a good day. Bye-bye.